The quiet power of grace. The glass facade of Crown Ridge Bank shimmered under the late morning sun, casting reflections onto the sidewalk like shards of polished silver. Pedestrians strolled by, some sipping their lattes, others talking hurriedly on phones, their lives unfolding in fragments. Amid the bustle, one woman approached the towering doors with unassuming purpose. At 34, Rachel Ellis didn't look like someone who had built an education foundation that had changed thousands of lives. Dressed in gray sweatpants and a plain white t-shirt, with her dark curls pulled into a loose bun, she carried a modest leather tote and the soft confidence of someone used to being underestimated and unfazed by it. Her husband, Christopher Ellis, walked beside her in quiet contrast. At 42, his presence was harder to ignore. His navy bespoke suit was cut with meticulous precision, his platinum watch subtle but unmistakable. Christopher had spent 2 decades building Ellis Strategic Group into one of the top-performing investment firms in the country. He exuded quiet authority, a kind that didn't need to announce itself. "You sure you want to do this solo?" Christopher asked, checking his watch as they approached the entrance. Rachel smiled and gently squeezed his hand. "Absolutely. The foundation's always been my lane. You handle capital, I handle kids." He grinned. "All right, I'll take my Singapore call in the lobby. Shouldn't be more than 20 minutes." They entered together, drawing different reactions. Bank employees glanced up, some straightening their postures at the sight of Christopher's tailored look. Rachel, by contrast, drew curious glances, some puzzled, some dismissive. No one imagined she was the one about to initiate a transaction larger than most of the accounts in the building. The reason Rachel was at Crown Ridge in person that morning was straightforward. Her foundation was launching a new literacy initiative, one that required a separate account with specific tax documentation and grant information. Most of their finances were handled digitally, but for this particular program, a joint effort with multiple state partners or presence was necessary. Christopher peeled off to take his call, his voice fading as he paced by the large window. Rachel headed toward the customer service desk, where a well-dressed blonde woman with a sleek bob and a crisp blue blouse looked up from her screen. "Good morning," Rachel said with a warm smile. "I'm here to make a deposit and open a new account for the Ellis Youth Literacy Foundation." The woman, whose nameplate read Candace Rivers, Client Services Manager, looked Rachel up and down before responding with a tight-lipped smile. "Do you already have an account with us, ma'am?" "Not yet. This is a new account, but our foundation already banks here under a different branch." "I have the full documentation," Rachel replied, pulling out a manila folder and placing it on the desk. Candace glanced at the check sitting atop the folder. Her eyes froze on the amount, $250,000. Her brows arched in surprise, then immediately furrowed into suspicion. "That's quite a large deposit," she said slowly. "May I ask where these funds came from?" Rachel remained calm. "They were raised at our annual gala. I have the 501c3 documentation, donation records, and the program proposal inside." Candace didn't touch the folder. Instead, she looked Rachel up and down again, clearly weighing the sight of sweatpants and a ponytail against the six-figure sum. "I'm sorry," Candace said, her voice rising slightly, drawing attention from a nearby couple. "We generally don't open new accounts of this size without extensive verification, especially when the origin of the funds isn't immediately verifiable." "I was told over the phone this would be sufficient," Rachel responded, trying to keep her voice steady despite the flush creeping into her cheeks. Candace leaned forward, her voice now carrying through the lobby. "M.S. Ellis. Rachel Ellis. M.S. Ellis. Krijnrik is a premier banking institution. We serve a clientele that expects discretion, professionalism, and yes presentation." She motioned loosely toward Rachel's attire. "I'm not certain this is the right fit for someone in your situation." Rachel blinked. "My situation?" Candace lowered her voice to a stage whisper. "People who walk in off the street, dressed like this, waving large checks, it's just unusual. We have to be cautious." Rachel's heart pounded in her chest, but she stood tall. "Are you refusing my deposit?" I'm advising you, Candace replied, finger pointing toward the exit, to take your business elsewhere before we involve security. We have to take potential financial fraud seriously. Rachel stood frozen, humiliated, and unsure whether to argue or leave. But across the room, Christopher had already turned mid-call, his eyes locking on the tense scene. He hung up abruptly and moved with quiet force toward the desk. "What seems to be the issue?" he asked calmly, though the steel in his voice was unmistakable. Candace turned with irritation until she saw who was speaking. The suit, the watch, the effortless authority. "I'm assisting this woman." "This woman is my wife," Christopher said, stepping beside Rachel and placing a hand on her shoulder. Candace paled. "Your wife?" "Yes." "Rachel Ellis, founder of the Ellis Youth Literacy Foundation." He gestured at the folder on the desk. "That deposit is for a new citywide program already backed by 3 state partners and a national nonprofit." The silence was deafening. Rachel straightened, reclaiming her composure. "The issue here isn't just about me. It's about your assumptions. You judged me because of how I look. You saw sweatpants, not credentials. You saw casual, not credibility." Candace looked like she might faint. Just then, a door opened across the lobby, and a tall man in a navy suit stepped out. His silver nameplate read Martin Langley, Regional Bank Director. He'd seen everything from his glass-walled office. "Mr. Ellis," Langley greeted, walking over briskly. "What an honor. I hope everything is being handled." "It wasn't," Christopher interrupted, "but I'm listening." Candace visibly shrank behind the counter as Langley's expression darkened. "Would you both come with me, please?" he said quickly, ushering them into a private conference room. Inside, Langley closed the door behind them and sighed. "Please accept my deepest apologies. This does not reflect our values." "It reflects a culture," Rachel said, no anger in her voice, just tired resolve. "One that judges worth based on appearance and assumes people in sweatpants can't be worth their balance sheets." Langley nodded slowly. "You're absolutely right. I want to make it right, not just with words, but with action." Over the next hour, Rachel outlined a plan-biased training for staff, partnership opportunities with underserved communities, and a new financial inclusion initiative co-branded with her foundation. Langley agreed on the spot. By the end of the week, Rachel's check had cleared, the new account had been established, and Candace Rivers had been reassigned to a non-client-facing role pending further review. But the story didn't end there. 6 months later, Rachel stood in front of a crowded conference hall. Behind her were visuals of the new open access banking program, a collaborative effort between Crown Ridge and the Ellis Foundation. "We often think that transformation requires massive gestures," she said. "But sometimes it starts with a mistake, a misjudgment, a moment that forces us to ask, what are we building and who are we excluding in the process?" In the audience sat Christopher, beaming with pride. Next to him was Martin Langley, now spearheading the bank's diversity initiatives nationwide. A few rows behind them, quieter but attentive, sat Candace Rivers. She'd attended the foundation's parent workshops, started volunteering at the local reading center, and most recently had enrolled her son in one of Rachel's after-school programs. Her face bore the quiet humility of someone who had faced their flaws and chosen to grow. After the presentation, Candace approached with a trembling hand and a folder. "My son's progress report," she said softly. "Your team changed everything. I judged you, and I was wrong." Rachel took the folder, then Candace's hand. "Then you've already taken the first step," she replied. That day, no headlines were written, no photos taken. But inside the walls of an institution once built on polished appearances and unspoken assumptions, something real had shifted. Not just for Rachel or Candace, but for every unseen person who would walk through those doors and finally be treated not by what they wore but by who they were. And as Rachel and Christopher walked hand in hand through the lobby that had once tried to reject her, they knew one truth above all. Change wasn't just possible. It had already begun.